He pushed the envelope over the table as if it were hush money and remarked, "You're lucky that we're even paying out your PTO. Just remember, we control your career references." That was meant to frighten me, delivered with a grin so broad I could see the spinach from last night still stuck in his molars. He probably anticipated tears or perhaps some frantic haggling, as if I would beg him not to poison my LinkedIn corpse. But all I did was stare at the envelope, then at him, and I contrived the tiniest smile you can give someone moments before you turn off their life support. It smelt of artificial lemon floor cleaner, printer toner, and the dying odors of someone who believed he was invincible. Fluorescents hummed above us like flies circling a fresh body. I didn't flinch. I didn't break eye contact. I didn't even blink. "Thank you," I said, folding the check neatly into my notebook. "Appreciate the clarity." He leaned back, hands behind his head, like he just won something. "It's just business, Ava. Nothing personal," which is exactly what people say when it's only personal, when it's about power, control, ego. I'd seen his ego sprawled across every status meeting, every code review he pretended to understand. Every sentence he ended with, "Make it happen." It wasn't a layoff. Let's not pretend. They wanted me out because I built something they couldn't understand, and that terrified them. When you're the one person who holds the foundation up, you don't get pats on the back. You get pushback. Silence. Then one day, a streamlining memo with your name in invisible ink. As I stood to leave, he gave me a fake laugh and said, "No hard feelings." I paused at the door, turned, and looked him square in the face, eyes dry, voice flat. Not a single one. Then I walked out. Back at my desk, it was quiet. Too quiet, like a scene in a war movie right after the bomb goes off and the sound cuts out. Most people didn't look up. Some pretended to be reading emails that weren't even open. A few had the decency to glance my way and then look down, guilty. Except Ethan, the intern. He gave me a small nod. Nothing more. That kid would go far, assuming they didn't grind him into powder like they tried with me. I packed fast. I'd always kept it light. One drawer, a coffee mug, a notepad with my architecture sketches, the pen I stole from the last offsite because it was the only thing that ever worked on those awful white bards. I didn't touch the plaque they gave me last year, Team MVP. That could stay. Let it rot. Before I shut my laptop for the last time, I sent 2 emails. One to legal, asking, politely of course, for a written breakdown of my IP contributions during the last 18 months, just for records, just in case. Used all the right words: documentation, clarification, alignment. But that email was a loaded gun in a velvet purse. The second was to myself, from my personal laptop, using a separate network. It was a memo, a sanitized version of the undocumented infrastructure map. No proprietary code, just a schematic of how things worked, the connections, the logic, the subtle balancing acts I'd engineered to keep the system from imploding under its own weight. Something only I understood because I never told them. They never asked. They just assumed I'd always be there. I hit send, wiped my desktop clean, formatted the drive, and dropped my badge in the tray like a spent bullet casing. By the time the elevator doors closed, my name had already been yanked from the Slack workspace. I watched the notification ping disappear from my phone. Someone was fast. They always are. They think deleting your name means deleting your impact. Let them think it. Let them tell whatever story they needed to. I wasn't angry, not the way they wanted me to be, not the messy, loud, lawsuit bait kind of angry. No, I was something worse. I was calm because I knew something they didn't. You can fire the architect, but if you don't understand the blueprint, you're just living in a house with no load-bearing walls. And one day, that house is going to creak, crack, then fall. But hey, at least they'll have a clean org chart. The click of my mug hitting the cardboard box sounded louder than it should have in a room full of people pretending I didn't exist. Maybe it was just me, but every stapler click and keyboard tap felt deliberate, like they were all trying to fill the silence I left behind. Not a single "we'll miss you." No side hugs, not even the performative "keep in touch" from the guy who used to steal my post-its and take credit for my JIRA tickets. Just 30 people, heads down, acting like their monitors were suddenly the most fascinating thing they'd ever seen. Even Claire, miss, we should get drinks sometime, turned to adjust the non-existent volume on her headphones when I passed. I didn't expect a parade. I'm not naive. But the total erasure stung more than I wanted to admit. The way they scrub you out before your chair's even cold, like you're contagious, like the scent of being expendable might rub off. Except Ethan, the intern, barely out of college, still used to speaking like people mattered. He stood awkwardly by the kitchen, clutching a granola bar like it was a life preserver, gave me this slow, firm nod, no words, just respect. I nodded back. Didn't smile. Didn't need to. It was the only real human gesture in the whole damn building. My box was half full, one photo frame I never hung, the mug that said, "Cash me outside," a notepad with a dozen scribbled architecture sketches no one else ever bothered to understand. I left the company hoodie. Let them have it. I wouldn't wear that thing to take out the trash. I moved slow, not out of sadness, but out of precision, like a surgeon packing tools after a clean cut. I unplugged my charger, coiled it tight, dropped it in the box like a final stitch. Then I opened my laptop one last time. Slack was already logged out. Cute. Someone upstairs was fast with the boot. GitHub access revoked. Repo sanitized. My name erased from the commit history like I never existed. But there are things they can't delete. I opened my private email, typed a message to myself. Subject: G3 Protocol Non-Prod Mapping. Inside, a sterile memo, stripped of branding, stripped of company markers, just logic flows, process diagrams, commentary on undocumented architecture decisions I made when the system kept buckling under load and no one else could fix it. I never told them how I'd stabilized it. They just assumed it stopped crashing by magic, and they were happy to pretend I had nothing to do with it. I hit send, then opened a new email, this one to legal. I was polite, measured, professional for clarity and future documentation purposes. I'd like a formal confirmation of my authorship and contributions to the following proprietary modules. Then I listed the critical subsystems, the ones everyone used, the ones I quietly built on weekends because deadlines were impossible and expectations were insane. The ones they never offered me credit for. That email was a landmine wrapped in HR-approved pleasantries. The second I clicked send, I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace, not victory, but weight, like I just placed something heavy and sharp on the floor behind me and walked away, knowing someone would step on it eventually. I closed the lid, stood up, took one last look at the screen. Then I pulled the plug. Walking to the elevator felt like moving underwater. The halls looked the same: cheap carpet, dying succulents, whiteboards smudged with half-baked brainstorms. But everything was quieter, like the building knew it had screwed up but didn't know how to say sorry. I didn't look back, not when the doors opened, not when they closed, not even when I heard the ding of another Slack notification. Probably someone reacting with a thumbs up to my departure like that made it okay. They can delete my profile picture, strip my name from the commit logs, reassign my parking spot to some dude with a louder voice and a worse grasp of relational databases. Systems remember, not the codebase, not the Confluence pages no one updates. I mean the actual systems, the ones we build to survive the chaos, the ones we patch at 2 a.m., the ones we hold together with caffeine and intuition and 3 layers of undocumented magic. And when those systems start to wobble, they'll realize what they erased wasn't a person. It was the only thing keeping the whole damn thing from collapsing. The day after I left NYLYNC, I didn't check email. I didn't post some fake Zen goodbye to the amazing people I worked with. I didn't need to. Ghosts don't write status updates. Instead, I woke up, stretched for the first time in months, without a Slack ping yanking me into a production fire, and stared at the ceiling for an hour. Just breathing, just remembering what silence felt like. No sprint planning, no fake agile, no meetings that should have been an email, but ended up a PowerPoint war between 2 directors who couldn't code their way out of a wet paper bag. I sat down and opened a clean doc. No logos, no branding, just white space and a blinking cursor. Then I started writing the truest version of my resume I'd ever written. Not the buzzword garbage they made us add, not collaborated cross-functionally with stakeholders to drive scalable solutions. No, this was facts, designed, built and stabilized the load balancing logic for 92% of platform traffic after third-party CDN integration failed. Independently authored backend routing protocols that reduced API latency by 37% without permission or applause. Rescued a Q4 product launch by reverse engineering a deprecated feature no one else understood. Rebuilt it in 48 hours while my director gave a speech about ownership. I didn't lie. I just finally told the truth. Once the resume was done, I created a new email alias. Ava R didn't exist on the internet anymore, but Air Wyatt did, a little nod to my grandmother. She'd have appreciated the stealth. Under that name, I opened a small consulting shop. Nothing flashy, no website, just word of mouth from 2 clients I trusted, ex-colleagues who'd left the tech grinder before it chewed them into oatmeal. They sent me lightweight gigs, infrastructure audits, API cleanup. One startup needed a duct tape backend untangled before their Series A, and I fixed it in 3 days. No Slack drama, no ego, just problem, solution done. It wasn't about money. It was about space, space to breathe, space to remember that I wasn't crazy, that I was good at what I did, that the failure wasn't mine, it was theirs. They just didn't know it yet. But NYC was starting to feel it. I didn't need inside intel. You can read a system's pain in the patterns. Public GitHub activity stalled. Weekly releases became bi-weekly, then monthly. Users started complaining on Reddit about weird behavior, pages timing out, user data syncing inconsistently. I saw a support thread titled, "Why is this feature so slow now?" with a dozen frustrated replies. I didn't click. I didn't need to, because I knew exactly what it was. It was the patchwork protocol I built when the platform started eating its own tail under high load. The one no one else touched. The one buried under 7 nested services and a DNS redirect nobody documented. I told them once, casually over lunch. The director nodded while chewing a sandwich and said, "Cool. Just make sure it's scalable." It wasn't scalable. It was surgical, a precise pressure point that redirected traffic like a water main bypassing a cracked pipe. And it worked flawlessly, quietly, but only if you understood why the pipe cracked in the first place. Now no one could figure it out. They kept opening tickets for latency regressions, adding hotfixes, pulling in DevOps to check logs that made less and less sense. I watched it all like someone tracking a slow gas leak from a block away. And still, no one said my name, not in public, not online, not in whispers loud enough to reach me. They couldn't, because saying my name would be admitting that I mattered. So instead, they blamed the tools, blamed legacy code, blamed version updates, anything but the fact that the woman they flushed without ceremony was the only one who ever truly understood how the whole machine ran without catching fire. But that's the thing about systems. They remember the hands that built them, even when the people don't. I didn't gloat. I didn't post a subtweet. I didn't email anyone back. I just watched and waited. Because when a structure starts to shift and no one knows which beam to reinforce, they don't fix it. They panic. Panic always makes noise. Eventually, the message came through at 2:13 a.m., one of those time-stamped, middle-of-the-night pings that tells you something's either on fire or about to be. They're pitching for acquisition. Buyer is big. Huge. No name, no greeting, no punctuation besides the period at the end, like it was a final no. It was from Tamir, one of the few competent devs left at NYC. Quiet guy, brilliant with memory optimization, always wore socks with sharks on them. He never messaged me after I left, never liked drama, so for him to send that, something was shifting. I stared at the screen for a minute, didn't reply, just sat there in the dark, the cold glow of the phone lighting up my ceiling. I could almost hear the anxiety in the sentence. He wasn't warning me out of guilt. He was warning me because he knew something was missing, and they were pretending it wasn't. 2 minutes later, another message, from a different number, different tone, same smell of unraveling. Mason, 2:15 a.m., did you leave or were you pushed? That made me sit up. Mason, lead engineer at Vaspera Systems, used to run back-end boot camps in San Francisco before climbing the food chain and vanishing into executive engineering land. I'd spoken at one of his events 5 years ago, a last-minute fill-in. Half the slides were broken. I'd walked the audience through a live debug of an API collapse with no prep. Mason had pulled me aside afterward and said, "If you ever want to leave your company, call me. You speak fluent infrastructure." We never worked together directly, but I tracked his rise, the kind of guy who never asks a question he doesn't already know the answer to. I stared at the text. "Did you leave or were you pushed?" I typed back at 2:16 a.m. "Does it matter?" Didn't wait for a reply. Didn't have to. Because if Mason was texting me now, before the acquisition was public, before due diligence, something in the repos or the system diagrams or the churn reports pointed to a black hole labeled Ask Ava, with a giant neon arrow no one wanted to acknowledge. I didn't respond again. I just lay back down, eyes wide open, heart like a metronome ticking one beat too fast. By morning, the Whisper networks had lit up like a Christmas tree. 3 unread emails from old colleagues. "Hey, random question. Do you remember how the redirect logic was originally set up?" Quick sanity check. "Do you know if the compliance module had a fallback protocol?" I didn't answer any of them. Not out of spite, but because I knew exactly why they were asking, and they weren't ready to say it out loud. They wanted plausible deniability, help without the headline. They wanted my brain without my name attached. I made coffee, opened Twitter, saw a vague tweet from NYLYNC's VP of Product about exciting transitions and the future of intelligent delivery infrastructure. It reeked of pitch deck desperation. I clicked on Vaspera Systems' LinkedIn page. Their hiring page was frozen. Their M&A team had gone dark a week ago. No posts, no new listings, just a pause like someone had pressed the clutch and was holding the car on a hill. I wasn't a threat yet. I wasn't even in the room, but the pieces were moving and I was watching. It was funny in a bleak way. The same people who'd erased me were now desperately trying to connect dots they couldn't see. They'd walked a buyer into a house with invisible wiring and told them, "Yeah, it all just works." Except now the buyer had questions, and I was the answer. Quiet power builds slow, like water pressure behind a dam, and they just heard the first hairline crack. The press release went out on a Tuesday morning, polished, bloated, a symphony of corporate nonsense, and while YNC is thrilled to explore strategic partnership opportunities with a leading enterprise cloud solutions provider. Translation: we're being acquired. We want to sound like we're driving the bus. And please, nobody ask about churn. I didn't flinch when I read it. I was on my 3rd client call of the day, helping a team in Austin figure out why their microservice stack kept cannibalizing itself under load. But I bookmarked the link anyway, right next to Vaspera Systems' job board and a dormant GitHub issue I knew was about to become a bomb. Inside NYLYNC, I imagined the scramble had already started. War rooms, slideshow polishing, product managers trying to remember how to say scalability without giggling. My old director, Doug, who once told me my documentation style was too thorough to be practical, was probably pacing in front of a whiteboard, trying to explain a system he never built with buzzwords he didn't understand. He'd be running point on the due diligence packet, cherry-picked metrics, uptime graphs from peak hours, user retention with the y-axis conveniently zoomed in. I could see the pitch deck in my head. Slide 1, vision. Slide 2, numbers. Slide 3, architecture overview. A giant block diagram with colorful rectangles and connector arrows that say SQS and Lambda, even though I never once used either. And my name? Gone. Vaporized, not in the attributions, not in the org charts, not in the engineering wins section. But metadata doesn't lie. Beneath the surface, in the internal systems Vaspera would be combing through, traces remained. API schema descriptions with author tags, deployment scripts that still referenced my initials in old shell comments, audit logs from code reviews I ran solo when the platform was falling apart. And then there was the comment I hadn't thought about in months, a placeholder, really, wedged deep inside the event logic, buried under 6 dependencies and 1 undocumented feature toggle. It read, hashtag if you're reading this, you're either me or the next person they'll blame. A joke, a grim one, typed during a 2 a.m. deploy, half delirious, after patching a time-based caching bug no one else could reproduce. That fix held the reporting pipeline together for over a year. No one ever asked how. They were just happy the dashboard stopped freezing. Until now, because someone did read it. A junior engineer, apparently. I found out through a whisper, one of those odd little ripples that travels sideways through the tech world. A tweet liked by someone I used to mentor, quoting, found the wildest code comment today, with a crying laugh emoji and a screenshot cropped just barely enough to avoid naming the repo. Except I recognized it immediately. The spacing, the indentation, the dry tone, mine. That meant the buyers were digging. That meant someone was trying to explain that section of the platform and failing. That meant the facade was cracking. I didn't need to interfere. Didn't need to leak anything. The gravity of the truth was doing all the work for me. When you remove the keystone from an arch, the collapse doesn't happen right away. For a while, everything looks fine until someone leans on it. Just the right pressure, just the right question. Who wrote this? Why does this function have no test coverage? Why does it work, but no one knows why? The problem with pretending someone didn't matter is that eventually, you're forced to explain why things start breaking the second they're gone. I closed the tweet, took another sip of coffee. A new email came in, a consulting inquiry from a mid-sized platform in Atlanta looking to optimize legacy protocols. I filed it away for later. Right now, I had a front-row seat to the unraveling, and I wasn't even in the building. Mason was never a dramatic guy. That's what made the next part all the more damning. During the third day of pre-acquisition technical review, he was combing through the export compliance documents, standard process, boring as hell, lists of contributors, citizenship statuses, access controls. All the boilerplate that's supposed to be a checkbox. But buried halfway down the second tab of the spreadsheet, past a wall of greenlit names and access groups, he saw mine. Reynolds, A. Status. Involuntary departure. Access revoked. Clearance. System-wide. He blinked. Read it again. Then he looked up across the table at the NYLYNC folks, 3 executives deep in positive synergy mode, all nodding along to a slide about product vision and frictionless integration. Mason quietly closed his laptop, not hard, not rude, just enough to change the air in the room. Let's pause here, he said, voice measured. I have a question. The projector froze on the next slide. Someone's overdesigned diagram of the NYLYNC data pipeline hung mid-sentence like a guillotine. The VP of product gave a nervous laugh. Sure, something unclear? Mason didn't answer him. He turned to the CTO. This part here, your routing layer, session handling, load balancing, fallback. It's labeled a stable legacy in the documentation. The CTO nodded slowly. That's right. Been running untouched for over a year. Rock solid. Mason raised an eyebrow. No changes in a year, in a high-load environment like yours? Correct, the CTO said, a little too quickly. Mason tapped the closed lid of his laptop like a nervous tick, then asked, who designed it? Silence, the kind that's louder than shouting, the kind that makes people look at their shoes, the kind that kills deals. The VP of engineering shifted in her chair, cleared her throat, and said, it was a collaborative effort. Mason just looked at her. She broke. I mean, it started under Ava Reynolds, but she's no longer with the company. The CEO of Vaspera, who had been silent until now, watching with a predator's stillness, leaned forward slightly, just enough. She left. The CTO hesitated. There was restructuring. She didn't align with the new direction. Was she consulted during this process? The CEO asked. No, she's been gone for some time. So no one from your current team can speak with certainty about that system's architecture? Another silence, the kind that ends careers. The VP of product piped up, desperate. We have documentation. Mason cut in. We've seen the documentation. It's vague, circular, and contradicts the observed behavior under synthetic load. There are modules calling deprecated services with no failover logic. Some routing decisions don't match any known policy. There's a comment in the code that says, quote, if you're reading this, you're either me or the next person they'll blame. The CTO paled. The CEO of Vaspera stood up, slow and smooth, like a judge at the end of sentencing. We're going to reschedule, he said. Take some time to revisit your internal architecture. But the valuation, the CFO started, is contingent on sustainability, the CEO said. And right now, you're asking us to buy a car with no steering column because the mechanic got fired and no one remembers how it turns. No yelling, no desk pounding, just pure, cold authority. Then he walked out. Mason lingered a beat longer, just long enough to watch the color drain from every face in the room. He didn't gloat, didn't smile, just said, "You should have kept her." Then he left too. Back in her apartment, Ava's phone buzzed. One message from a number not in her contacts. "Known they're choking. You felt it coming, didn't you?" Ava didn't answer right away. She poured herself a drink, sat by the window, watched the city move like an engine no one fully understood, and thought, they finally leaned on it. The email subject line hit her inbox like a heartbeat skipping. Confidential technical advisory. Immediate. No greeting, no fluff, just urgency stripped of punctuation. Ava sipped her coffee, black, half cold. She didn't care. Stared at it for a moment without clicking. Outside the cafe window, downtown buzzed on autopilot. Lawyers jaywalked in $1,000 shoes. A street preacher argued with a traffic light, and someone on a lime scooter narrowly avoided becoming a hood ornament. Ava didn't move. She'd been expecting this, not hoping for it, just waiting. Gravity always wins. She tapped the screen. The sender was masked behind a Vaspera proxy address. The language screamed Mason, precision disguised as vagueness. Requesting your availability for a closed-door consult regarding unresolved architecture concerns stemming from legacy systems inherited via pre-merger assessment. Translation: they're panicking, and you're the last flashlight in the tunnel. She didn't respond. Not yet. Back at NYYNC, the internal implosion had begun. The acquisition was indefinitely postponed, a sanitized Slack update that immediately set half the company on fire. Engineering leads were pulled into hour-long alignment, huddles where no one aligned on anything. Product managers who'd spent the last 6 months pretending they understood the backend were now frantically messaging developers like, "Hey, real quick, can you explain what Ava built?" The VP of engineering cracked first, sending a mass email to the entire technical team. Subject: urgent, routing protocol ownership. If anyone has documentation, knowledge, or contacts who can assist with the architectural logic behind the legacy routing protocols, please respond ASAP. We're blocked at multiple layers. Need clarity before end of day. Please escalate immediately. It was 11:32 a.m. By 11:34, a junior engineer replied, "I think Ava touched that system." By 11:35, Mason replied, all lowercase, no greeting. Only Ava can speak to it. The director who had fired her, the one with the smirk and the reference threat, was suddenly OOO with no return date. Some said stress leave. Others said internal reassignment, which is corporate speak for he's being dragged into rooms where lawyers take notes. Someone in HR sent out a form asking for knowledge transfer candidates. Ava's name was brought up again, quietly, then louder. Then someone remembered she wasn't on LinkedIn, no email, no website, no digital breadcrumbs to follow, just silence until the meeting request landed in her inbox. Ava finished her coffee, sat still, let the moment breathe. Across the cafe, a couple argued over a parking ticket. A dog barked at its own reflection. She didn't hear any of it. She was somewhere else, back in the server room at 3 a.m., configuring failover logic by flashlight during a storm that knocked out power across half the city, back in a whiteboard session where she diagrammed an edge case no one understood, and the CTO said, "Let's table that for now," back in her apartment 3 weeks post-firing, watching the GitHub graphs flatline. And now here they were, back at her door, not because she made noise, but because she made something that worked. She hit reply, typed 2 words, "Let's talk." Then she closed her laptop and smiled, just a little, the kind of smile you wear when you realize the foundation they thought they stood on was yours the whole damn time. The room was quiet, not tense, just deliberate. Soundproofed walls, frosted glass, a carafe of untouched cucumber water sweating condensation on a table that probably cost more than her last 3 bonuses combined. Ava sat at one end of the conference table, laptop open, cursor blinking in a terminal window. At the other end, Mason, calm as ever, flanked by Vaspera Systems CEO and their general counsel, both watching her like surgeons waiting for a vital sign to return. She didn't bring notes. She didn't need slides. What she had couldn't be captured in bullet points or diagrams. It was in her head. Entire architecture trees, failover maps, latency pivot contingencies, the unspoken logic that kept systems breathing when everything else failed. She clicked a few keys, pulled up a stripped-down sim environment, and began. Her voice was low, clear, no theatrics. So, the routing fallback doesn't initiate through the main queue. It forks silently through a sidecar daemon we pinned to the old Redis cluster. That cluster was never re-architected when we moved from on-prem cache layers because, well, no one knew it still existed except me. Mason nodded once. The protocol works by faking a dead node condition and letting the health checks trigger the redirect path. But the key is to fool the monitor service without disrupting the core heartbeat. It's dirty. It's fragile. But it held your acquisition target together during 3 major outages. She tapped a few more commands, brought up real-time logs, showed the heartbeat spoof, the load routing trick that bought NYLYNC 6 months of fake stability. No one spoke. The silence wasn't awkward, it was reverent. When she finished, she sat back, crossed her arms loosely, not smug, not defensive, just done. The CEO of Vaspera closed his notebook, leaned forward, and said, "You're undercompensated." Ava didn't flinch. She didn't play coy. She let the sentence hang in the air like a tolling bell. "We'd like to make you an offer," he continued. "VP of Platform Engineering, clean slate, build what you want, how you want. We match equity. 7-figure salary, full autonomy. Your team, your stack, your standards." He slid a single page across the table. It wasn't a contract, it was a term sheet, pre-signed, numbers already filled in. Mason said nothing, just watched, eyes steady. There was no "I told you so" in his look, just quiet affirmation, like he'd known all along this moment was inevitable. Ava looked down at the paper. The zeros didn't impress her, not really. What caught her eye was the clause at the bottom: no non-compete, no NDAs blocking lateral movement, no ownership claims on pre-existing IP. Freedom. She didn't smile, not fully. But something in her chest loosened, like a strap finally unbuckled after years pulled too tight. She reached for the pen, paused. "Just one thing," she said. The CEO raised an eyebrow. No press release, no announcement, no new leadership to stabilize a flailing asset narrative. "I'm not interested in being someone's savior headline." He nodded. "Done." She signed. When she stepped out of the building 20 minutes later, the air felt heavier, but in a good way, like a thunderstorm about to break, not the suffocation of a stale office and stale fear. She didn't check her phone. She didn't message anyone. She just walked 3 blocks to the bakery that still made croissants like butter secrets folded into paper, sat down outside, took a bite, and breathed for the first time in far too long, not because she had to, but because she could. The room was glass-walled and humming with expensive anticipation. Soft jazz piped in through the ceiling, just loud enough to fake calm. NYLYNC's leadership stood in front of a 20-slide pitch deck like preachers at the altar of vision. Center stage, Doug, the director who once told Ava with that eating grin, "We control your career references." Now he was sweating through his designer shirt, reading from cue cards like a high schooler trying to fake his way through Hamlet. His tone was falsely confident, every third sentence punctuated by a throat clear. Mason sat across from him at the long obsidian table, arms folded, expression unreadable. To Doug's credit, the beginning of the pitch was polished, rehearsed, talking about innovation, market fit, cloud-native resilience, and post-scale optimization. Empty phrases wrapped in expensive language. Everyone nodded. That's how these things go. Until slide 17, departures and transitions. Doug clicked the remote. The slide popped up with a grid of names, titles, and sanitized blurbs. Reynolds A., Senior Systems Architect. Departure, Organizational Streamlining. Notes, infrastructure handed off to internal team. Documentation complete. A lie in 3 lines. Mason leaned forward slightly, like a man who just noticed the room was built on sand. He said nothing, just turned his head to the CEO sitting beside him and whispered 5 quiet words. The CEO's face drained. He didn't ask a question. He didn't seek clarification. He just looked down, expression hollow, and gently, almost apologetically, closed his laptop. That sound echoed louder than anything Doug had said in the last 20 minutes. Doug stammered, there's more context on that if you'd like to. The CEO stood. We're done here. No raised voice, no fury, just a cold verdict delivered with the finality of a guillotine drop. One by one, the Vaspera delegation gathered their things. Mason was the last to leave, paused by the door, looked back at Doug, and said, "You should have known the difference between firing a name and removing a pillar." Then he walked out. Across the city, Ava sat at her desk in a sunlit corner office that still smelled faintly of new carpet and untouched white boards. She wasn't working, just reading a book of short essays on architecture, not code, but actual buildings. Mason had sent it to her 2 weeks earlier with a note, "Thought you'd appreciate the parallels. Some structures fall because of no one checked the foundation, so others fell." Her cell rang. He looked like someone just yanked the floor out from under him, said Tamir at 12:42 p.m. slowly. Ava put down the phone. There was silence, tinged with the sound of inevitable fate, and no response. She didn't share anything online, take a screenshot of the text, or forward it to Mason. She didn't need to destroy it, so she just gave a little, private, and kind smile. She simply moved aside to allow him to demonstrate to the world what happens when the one person who is keeping everything together quietly leaves and allows gravity take care of the rest. Many thanks to you elderly office legends. Keep the switch-flicking mayhem going by subscribing. Your former employer is trembling in their shoes.